Cat, Jay's voice whispered. Cat, what do you see? Give me a second, I whispered back. The woman paced in front of me. She seemed to have a hard time sitting completely still. While her eyes remained rapt and focused on me, her head shifted this way and that at every noise, tilting almost imperceptibly against the breeze. Her wings shifted and ruffled constantly, giving the impression of tireless energy and intense power held at bay. You are younger than I expected, she said after a moment. Not yet a woman, but the smell of your blood is much older. Oh, Jesus Christ, the smell of my blood. My knees nearly liquefied. Her presence was crushing, as if I was standing in front of every leader of every major country on Earth, and required to give a speech on a topic I hadn't studied for. I was still pressed hard against the red door and refused to move forward into her wingspan. I swallowed, clearing the sudden lump in my throat. I apologize, but I don't know what that means. She seemed to find that funny. You are truly a youngling, and yet you and the others wander through these expanses with such relative ease. We have watched you ever since you stepped through that door. Her gaze snapped to the red door behind my back, and then back down to my face. Obvious interest unveiled on her features. You have something that would be very valuable to many here. I didn't know what to say to that. I opened my mouth to ask what she meant, but she suddenly cocked her head sharply to the side, pupils contracting to tiny pinpoints of black in a sea of red and gold. It encroaches. Whatever you've done to disturb it, it now presses its influence between the expanses. Her gaze flicked back to me. You are here to clean up your mess, yes? Yes, that's the goal. I felt absurdly like I had forgotten something extremely important when talking to her, as if she were in on an inside joke that she expected me to join her in, and yet I didn't know what it was. It's coming closer. She shook her head, feathers ruffling around her face for a moment, and her wings expanded. It may know that you are here. I tire of holding this form, but I will give you this, that its door and itself are intrinsically connected. It is a being of gateways, of passages, of in-betweens and not places. What you do to its gateway, you do to itself. She shuddered before I could get a word out, shivered and hunched forward, and in an undulating ripple of feathers the woman was gone, and the owl blinked at me. Wickedly hooked beak flashing in the eternal sunset. It flapped its wings in a powerful downbeat and lifted off the ground, rising higher overhead before clearing the skyline of buildings and disappearing, taking off into the twilight. Jay, I said quietly when she was gone, I think I have an idea. What happened? I'll tell you, I promise, but just bear with me. I may not be able to talk much. I took off in a light run, keeping my eyes peeled for anything that would seem out of place in this red-gold world. Every few moments, a shadow would fall across me as a dark shape would fly overhead between buildings. Like every time before when we had explored the world behind the red door, I was watched from a distance. I wondered if it were only the owl woman watching, or if there were more like her far above me in the sky. And then, as I reached a wide-open marketplace, empty of stalls or beings, I heard it. A low rumbling, with a choppier sound layered over the top. Fuck. It's here, Jay. I don't have much time. I walked out to the center of the empty marketplace, turning in a slow circle, watching the nearby buildings and doors. When I say so, I need everyone in the circle, including you, to picture the green door in your minds. Try not to think of anything else but just the green door. You got it? Oh, okay, we can do that. What are you doing? Right now? I'm waiting. The noise grew, not louder, but intensified, sending low vibrations through my body. The gilt cobblestone beneath my feet seemed to shiver through the bottoms of my shoes, and I kept turning, barely blinking, staring hard into the surrounding architecture. On my third turn in this manner, I saw it. The black door. "All right," I said quietly. "If I die or go crazy, you guys had better come in and fix this." "No promises," Jay said wryly. I could sense her attempt at humor, but underneath her voice there was a slight tremble. She was scared. That made two of us. I walked slowly towards the door. It looked the same as it had before, but larger, looming against the backdrop of a glittering golden wall set on the far end of the marketplace. I was a tall girl, and the doorknob was almost as high as my eye level, making me feel like a child again. I turned it and purposefully pulled the door open. The inside of a barn greeted me, heavily obscured in shadows, dead straw and dirt scattering into the darkness ahead of me. I took a deep breath and stepped through. The moment I crossed the threshold, I was once again in the gray world, color gone and the distant noise thrumming through my bones. But this time I turned and immediately shut the door behind me. "Jay," I whispered, now, do it, the green door." "Come on, you guys," I heard Jay say. Her voice was muffled and far away, but I heard her, and with that, I pushed the black door back open. The red world was gone, and in front of me were the blanched gray woods, so similar and yet so different from the woods we had created ourselves. I stepped back outside, heading purposefully into the forest. I had taken a few steps when I heard a deep, heavy thrumming, and glanced over my shoulder back towards the barn. It stood there, in front of the black door. It was tall, much taller than the threshold of the door, and roughly humanoid-shaped, but dark, like a hole had opened up in the world and had taken on sentient form. The edges of its shape seemed to bend and warp the atmosphere immediately around it. As I stared, the darkness seemed to deepen, and I thought I began catching glimpses of something else. Far behind in the blackness, there began to appear the hint of a shape, or shapes. Shapes with extra edges, with lines and dips and divots and points in places that made no sense. Undulating in unsettling movement only when my eyes looked elsewhere. My stomach churned in a revolting repulsion, my eyes desperately wanting to reject what I was seeing. I felt a trickle of wetness slide down my cheek as I stared, and I reached up to wipe my eyes, my fingers coming away stained with blood. My head was pounding, my very thoughts squeezing under its heavy weight, and as I stepped back, it seemed to take a step towards me. And then another. Fuck no. I turned and ran, hurtling into the trees. "Jay," I cried, "come on, you guys, I need that green door." She didn't answer. The forest around me kept flickering, shifting in a cacophony of buzzing noises and that deep rumbling sound. Trees were to my left or right in one moment and then suddenly in front of me in the next, and I had to keep changing my direction. A few times I slammed into tree trunks, scrabbling in a panic against the ground as I regained my footing. I glanced behind me a few times, and always the shadow followed, seeming to never lose ground, but always gaining a little, following steadily behind me, long limbs moving in disquieting asynchronicity, with the patience and dark purpose of something that has all the time in the world. I felt myself weakening. It was different from getting tired in the physical world. I suddenly felt less, as if I were a canister of water that had cracked and was slowly spilling my contents out onto the ground around me. My vision began blurring, tunneling at the edges. Nausea overtook me and I was panting heavily, sweat and a darker liquid sliding down the sides of my face and into my eyes. Its thrumming, deep, bone-cracking sounds sunk into my body, and I could feel it squeezing, pressing, emptying. "Jay," I whispered weakly and tripped over a tree root that had suddenly appeared in my path. I hit the ground hard, breath escaping my lungs in a heavy grunt, and I turned onto my back as the shadow closed in on me, reaching ever taller into the sky, its edges rippling like the surface of a puddle that had begun to spread. "Jay!" I scrabbled backwards, and then my hands touched something underneath me, something that felt wholly alien compared to the pine needle-covered ground, smooth, solid wood, and the shape of a doorknob. I glanced down. The green door had appeared directly underneath my body, lying on the ground. I didn't hesitate but gripped the knob hard and turned it, allowing the door to fall open beneath my body. I flew downwards, my brain spinning at the shift in orientation, and I landed heavily on the sandy shore of the grotto, sprawling with the green door open in the cave wall in front of me. I could see the gray sky through the door, and as I scrambled to my feet, the dark shadow bent down over the door, blocking out the sky, filling the opening as it tried to reach through. I swiftly leapt forward, grabbed the edge of the door, and slammed it shut in its face. I held it closed for a moment, panting. "If you want me, asshole," I whispered, "you'll have to come in here the hard way." I turned and faced the grotto. It was exactly as we had left it. Gorgeous luminescent algae made the water glow, while threads of fungus wove a tapestry of green, blue, and purple across the rock walls. The far edge of the underground cavern opened up into landscape and sky far above, and what I focused on now was the little camp that had always been at the edge of the water. The tent and the campfire blazing merrily away in a fire pit dug in the sand. I moved quickly. I knew it would have an easier time pressing into the expanse this time, and I swiftly knocked over the tent, stepping hard on the fabric and pulling up with all my strength, ripping it open. I removed one of the tent poles and snapped it in a similar way, using my weight to bend and break the flexible wood. I quickly bound the shattered pieces together with the shredded tent canvas, and repeated this a few times until I had at least 4 bundles of wood bound in cloth. A deep rumbling filled the air. Whop, 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 whop. I turned to face the far cavern wall. In the space of a blink, there was smooth rock wall, and then the black door was there, ominous in its height, a black stain in this beautiful place. I moved fast, my heart pounding. No time to question or quail, just do what you need to do next. I grabbed one end of one of the bundles and passed the other end through the campfire. It took a few tries, but soon the thick wood and bundled fabric caught fire. I looked up as I straightened and noticed that this time it wasn't waiting for me. The door had begun slowly swinging outward on its own. I approached it quickly, and as it swung open, there it was, standing in a far-off field of gray grass, a stark black wound against the sky, tall and impossible. It began walking toward me. I held my breath, swung my arms back with all my strength, and tossed the flaming bundle through the door. The last thing I saw through the door was an eruption of white, colorless flame as the bundle landed in that dry sea of dead grass and immediately caught fire. My eardrums nearly burst at the explosion of sound that reverberated from that fathomless thing, and I gripped the edge of the black door and shoved it closed with all my strength. I wasn't done yet. 2 more bundles went against the base of the door, and the third I lit on fire just as I had done the first. With my flaming prize in hand, I stalked towards the black door. Thump! It rattled and shook. The knob turned furiously back and forth. I carefully bent down and placed the flaming bundle against the others, propping it up so that the fire would have a stable base. Thunk! I lunged back. The door bowed outward, an unearthly rumbling filling the cavern for a moment. wood screeching in protest, and then the fire caught and blazed stronger and stronger, finding purchase in the kindling I had provided, and began to steadily work its way up the surface of the black door. A horrible keening ripped through the grotto, and I slammed my hands over my ears, falling to my knees. Rock cracked and split, dust and pebbles falling to the sandy grotto floor, and I curled down into a ball, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the worst. And then, the rumbling slowly went silent. I looked up. I was a lone girl kneeling in a grotto, watching a slowly growing fire blaze merrily away. I moved and sat at the far end, pressing myself against the cave wall next to the green door, and watched it burn all the way down, wanting to make sure. While I sat, I related to Jay and the others what had occurred in the Red World, and how I used the campfire in the grotto to hopefully destroy the black door. I waited, ready to run if my plan didn't seem to work, but as I watched, the flames seemed to burn brighter and brighter, until finally the door crumbled in a heaping pile of ash and coals, leaving nothing but a smooth rock wall behind it. I stood, turned to the green door, and cautiously opened it. Lush green woods greeted me. I stepped through, closing the door behind me. I could feel my weariness digging through my mind as I trekked back through the forest, heading in the direction of our all-too-familiar clearing. On the way, I spotted some movement far off between the trees. As I glanced to my left, a beast very similar to an elk, but larger, with dark-tipped horns and a large staring eye in the middle of its sable forehead, caught my gaze. It inclined its head to the side for a moment, before turning and disappearing into the forest. When I reached the clearing, Elia was there, waiting. I stopped, eyeing her cautiously. She looked like her normal self, wearing the pajamas she had worn Friday night. "Are you actually you?" I asked. She snorted at me. "Do you have any idea what I just went through? Don't be a dick." Well, it definitely sounded like Elia. I walked into the clearing, eyeing her warily. She was not a demonstrative person, but she smiled at me as I approached. "Not bad," she said. "Thanks for coming back." She took my hand. It would have been easy in that moment to mistrust everything I had been seeing, but a part of me needed to believe that we had fixed whatever it was that we had broken. "Jay," I said, "bring us back." I squeezed Elia's hand and closed my eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Open your eyes. Elia was back in school the next day. She seemed pale and still a little weak, but mostly herself. She said she didn't remember much while she was sick and was constantly in and out of consciousness with a bad fever. She didn't remember anything about the part of herself that was lost in the Shadow Man's gray world, or coming back with me, but didn't seem overly concerned about it. I think she was just relieved that she wasn't sick anymore and was eager to put it all behind her, as were we all. We never went out into the woods again, and once high school came around, we all seemed to drift and go our separate ways. I've lost touch with most of my old friends through the years. Some I've found again on Facebook, and a few I saw at my high school reunion a few years ago. Everyone seems to be well-adjusted in their adulthood, but no one has ever tried anything like 7 Doors again. And currently, no one seems to have any contact with Elia, or know where she is. I've mostly stayed away from any sort of astral projection, lucid dreaming exercises, or journeying type meditations. While I bend towards being agnostic, skeptical, I also collect various religious paraphernalia, including blessed Saint Benedictine amulets. One I keep in the house, the other in my car, statues of saints and Vedic deities. Ganesha guards the hallway up our stairs. We have little Jizo statues on the front porch, and sometimes I surreptitiously hide little bowls of salt in the corners of the house. My husband thinks it's quirky, that I'm constantly questioning everything and demanding proof, but then secretly filling the house with protective charms and statues. Last year, I became pregnant with my first child. I found that I was having increasingly vivid dreams, which is common during pregnancy, but something strange about them made me question what I was really dreaming, and made me think back on this childhood experience. A couple of times, I would dream that I was walking through beautifully sunlit woods, relaxed and comfortable. And though he didn't show up physically as himself, I could feel the presence of my child with me, floating over my shoulder like a tiny ball of warmth. We would walk for what seemed like hours, taking in the woods and each other's company, never speaking, but feeling each other deeply in a way that I can't really describe. If you've ever carried or given birth to children, you may know what I mean. During one of these dreams, I remember sitting at the edge of a pond, looking out across the expanse of water, the little presence of my son hovering softly next to me. For some reason, I looked down into the water below me, admiring the reflection of the woods in the still, smooth surface. I saw something strange on the far end of the pond, reflected back in the water. Puzzled, I glanced up. Ahead of me, across the water, a large gray barn stood on the shoreline. The barn was on fire. Alarm and a sudden shock of terror shot through me, and I gasped awake, shaking. My husband woke up, asked me if I was all right, and did his best to settle me down before falling back asleep. I don't knowingly enter any sort of meditation that may take me elsewhere. After that experience, I know better. Maybe we stopped it for a little while, made its connection to whatever plane we were exploring a little weaker. But I know for a fact that what we did won't last, that I am not forgotten, and that I am still, 20 years later, being watched. Maybe someday I'll find a way of severing its connection to me for good. Be safe, travelers. And for fuck's sake, if you see it, please never open a black door. Hey everyone, Random Randy here. Thank you very much for listening, and you have just completed the Playing the Game of 7 Doors series written by Shortcake Slayer on the NoSleep subreddit. I'm really pleased with the way that it turned out. I thought it was a fantastic story. It had a lot of different elements to it, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. If you'd like to see more videos like this from me, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it around to send the creepy, spooky vibes to your friends. Because honestly, who doesn't need a little nightmare fuel? We'll see you next time.